Hi, this is Mike with episode 64 of Getting Everyone Moving, brought to you by Palms to Pines Parasports. Today we're interviewing Jason Allen. Hey, Jason.
Hey, how we doing?
All right. So, Jason, tell us about you're with USTA. Tell us about your role in promoting wheelchair tennis and adaptive tennis.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. So my name is Jason Allen. I am currently a manager in the USTAU department at USTA National. USTAU meaning USTA University. So we oversee the educational piece inside of the USTA. We are the accrediting agency for all of the teaching organizations that are in the states. Before I was moved to that department, however, I was the manager for wheelchair tennis for the United States Tennis Association. We're proud to say that the USTA is one, if not the only, national governing body in the world that took on a disability sport. Most disabled sports have their own governing bodies, and those that don't, actually, as far as I know, are managed by the USOPC. So we're proud of that. However, with that being said, Mike, the creation of the USTA wheelchair tennis department has somewhat kept us on an island a little bit, even within the USTA, since its inception in 1998. For example, if there was ever an issue with an adult tournament, that would go to the wheelchair department. If there was an issue with a junior camp, that'd go to the wheelchair department. So all those business units do exist within the USTA: juniors, adult, competition, player development, foundation. So about 2 months ago, we finally got the go-ahead from our chief executive, Craig Morris, to start the integration of wheelchair tennis into every business unit within the USTA. And therefore, we have dissolved the USTA wheelchair tennis department. So that's why I moved over to the USTAU, because I have a background in education, have a master's in educational leadership, was formerly a teacher and assistant principal at a high school for many, many years, and then finishing a doctorate now in educational leadership. So for the past 4.5 years, Jason Harnett, who's the national head coach, and I have been spearheading all wheelchair tennis for the country. And now we're offshooting into other areas. So yeah, it's an exciting time for us, Mike.
So talk about the growth of wheelchair tennis. I mean, are there certain areas of the country where it's really growing? What's kind of your strategy for getting more wheelchair tennis players?
That's a great question and a multifaceted one. In regards to wheelchair tennis, let me start with a high level explanation. Besides wheelchair basketball, it's the oldest, one of the oldest of all the disabled sports in the world. It was invented in 1977 by Brad Parks. And we have enjoyed 40 plus years of worldwide infrastructure. We also love to tout ourselves as the most integrative and professional of all the disabled sports. There's only one rule difference between able-bodied tennis and wheelchair tennis, is that they get 2 bounces if they choose to use it.
Yeah.
And then number 2, we're the most professional because we have an entire worldwide professional tennis tour with 200 tournaments worldwide. You can be a full-time professional wheelchair tennis player, and if you're good enough, make it to Wimbledon, the US Open, Australian Open, and French Open, and then of course we have the Paralympics. So I think wheelchair basketball also has a professional component to it, but nowhere near as large and organized as we are, and has the entire competitive pathway opportunities that we have. So that's a really high level explanation of the growth of wheelchair tennis. We've seen it, it started in Southern California by Brad Parks in 1977. And now when you start to look at worldwide rankings, there's 500 men ranked in the world, probably 300 women. And the quads, there's maybe 150 quads ranked in the world. These are professional players. So when you think of professional players being a small population of your nation's players, think about how many other people are actually playing this sport worldwide. So in regards to the other part of your question, Mike, the growth of wheelchair tennis, we have seen a very healthy bit of participation in our country for a long, long time. However, right now, I would say it's quite stagnant, if not declining, over the past 5 or 6 years. Now, I'm a data person and have been constantly reviewing the data in terms of tournament play for the past 5 years. And there are two pieces of data that are quite important. First is what we call unique participation. In other words, if I, Jason Allen, play wheelchair tennis in one tournament in the entire year, I'm counted once, right? And then you just have overall participation. So if I, Jason Allen, play 8 tournaments, well, I participated 8 times. And so when we look at unique participation from when I started this job in 2016 to now, we haven't seen any growth. And depending on the years, we've seen some decline, which makes sense, Mike, when you think about it, because in the last 8 to 10 years, as you well know, the adaptive sports movement and the Paralympic movement have grown exponentially.
Yeah, right.
So you see all these other sports starting to adapt themselves and start having their own adaptive sports component with their own national governing body, their own competitive structure. You see many more sports being added to the Paralympics. So it makes sense that you're going to have other people playing other sports, right? However, here's the grim data that we looked at, Mike. And if you want to interject or ask any more questions, please tell me to be quiet.
I will.
When I started to, my boss at the time, asks me on a yearly basis to create my own goals for the department.
Yeah.
And being a data person, like I said, I started to notice that there's literally no juniors playing wheelchair tennis. I think in 2017, we had 17 kids in the entire country play a tournament. And I think 2018, it was maybe 13.
Right.
So that was a huge red flag to me. So I brought the idea to my colleagues in the department and I said, we really need to come up with a plan to get kids in chairs. Yeah. Otherwise, our sport in the long run is going to suffer greatly. And so what we did, Mike, about 2 years ago, we launched what we call the Net Generation Junior Wheelchair Tennis Strategy. And the strategy was predicated on the Olympics being in LA in 2028.
Yeah.
So we started with that strategy in 2018. And we said, in 10 years, if this works, we'll have a whole new crop of kids that are now going to become members of Team USA and represent our country.
Yeah.
So that was a massive project that we started, Mike. And since then, we have 15 Net Generation regional providers located in strategic areas about the country, and their sole purpose is to help other programs in their region start, fund them, teach people how to teach wheelchair tennis. Yes, the main focus is to get kids, but we would never exclude any adults because adaptive sports, Paralympic sports, a lot of people come to them due to an injury they may have later on in life. So, you may have adults playing tennis for their very first time after a spinal cord injury, a car accident, maybe a congenital disease or something like that. So you don't want to exclude them. And quite frankly, Mike, the same way that we teach juniors should be the same way we teach adults from the beginning.
Right.
There shouldn't be too much difference there. Obviously, adults come with maybe experience before in athletics and may have some already acquired hand-eye coordination, so maybe they learn faster, but we start them off the same way. So I would say, with that being said, Mike, we've seen an exponential growth in junior wheelchair tennis play in the last few years. Since its launch, we've introduced the sport to, I think, more than 500 kids at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. And of those 500, I believe, and the coordinator of the whole program's name is Evan Enquist. He's the head coach of the Alabama wheelchair tennis team, which are the, 4-peat national champions in collegiate wheelchair tennis. He has all the exact numbers, so I'm just sort of paraphrasing here, but I believe that out of those 500 plus kids, we now have a crop of 50 50 kids across the country now competing regularly. So, I mean, when you think about that, you go from 13 kids to 50.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of numbers when you juxtapose wheelchair tennis with able-bodied tennis, but for our sport, it's almost triple growth.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. I want to pick up on a couple of points that you mentioned. So, wheelchair basketball started after World War II.
Right.
Veterans came back. Gutman in England, in the U.S., some stuff started. I mean, Brad Park, we all know the name, but why? I mean, why did he start wheelchair tennis? Can you tell us some of the history of it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that question because, as you well know, I teach all of the coach development workshops across the country in wheelchair tennis. And the very first thing we start with is the history of wheelchair tennis because it is important.
Yeah.
It is really important to honor the legacy and the lineage of those who have come before us. Without someone like Brad Parks, I don't have a job. Right. Without someone like Brad Parks, we don't have so many of these benefits that we have now. And it's important to keep telling his story. He was actually a professional skier, very, very good. And he still skis to this day, actually. And he had a spinal cord injury while he was training. And the story, as far as I know, and it was told to me anecdotally through Jason Harnett, who used to give Brad Parks lessons in Southern California, in Mission Viejo. Being in rehab, there were some courts there at the hospital. And Brad, before his accident, had dabbled in tennis and of course, I know a little bit about this story because I just wrote another online course about wheelchair tennis, and I saw some YouTube videos out there where he explains a little bit of this, that he was going to spend a summer to really learn tennis. And he had planned this out, because he really liked it. And so there were some courts there at the rehab hospital. And basically the bug that got into him was somebody said that there's no way he could do that. There's no way you can play tennis in a wheelchair. And that was that spark that he needed. Oh, yes, I can. Now, Jason tells this story as well. He says that there were two gentlemen playing next to them one day, and they asked to play doubles with them because it wasn't just Brad Parks. It was another gentleman by the name of Jeff Minnebraker, who was more of the guru on the side of adapting and equipping the chair to make it more safe and more mobile, right? So him and Jeff Minnebraker were playing doubles and asked them to play, and they were like, of course not, you can't play with us. And it was like, it was like another spark or bug that got in their head about, oh, yes, we can. And according to Jason Harnett, some months later, they challenged them again, and then they ended up beating them because these were exceptional athletes. Jeff Minnebraker, I don't know, there's YouTube videos of him out there and what he could do. Yeah. He was a physical therapist, helped a lot of people in rehab. So that was how it started with Brad Parks. And he founded the National Wheelchair Tennis Foundation. And it was the governing body of wheelchair tennis for many, many years until 1998, until the USTA took it over. But Brad spent his entire life from that moment on traveling all around the world and doing exhibitions and bringing the sport to wherever. And, John Newcomb, famous tennis player from Australia, Grand Slam champion, brought him to Australia and forged a really good relationship with him. And it just really took off. And, once the USTA took it over, the ITF took it over, Brad and Wendy Parks, his wife, kind of stepped away and just let it grow. And so they, to this day, they sit back and they just look at it with a dumbfounded look, like, I can't believe how big this thing has gotten.
There is another point you made about the professional part of it. I've interviewed some wheelchair basketball Paralympians. They're in Europe because that's the only place, they can play professionally. I don't know what they earn, or I guess they earn a decent living. I don't know. But the fact that USTA is really supporting wheelchair tennis has seemed to make a huge difference.
It does. We have a very good structure, a grant structure. Jason Harnett, who is our national head coach and head coach of Team USA, would be able to speak to it a little bit better. But there are various levels of induction onto Team USA. You have, the juniors, then you have the developmental team, and then you have the actual Team USA. And once you're on Team USA, you are given quarterly grants, and those grants are increased depending on your world ranking. And typically there's also a bonus at the end of the year if there's leftover monies. And of course, we support them in other ways as well. In international team competitions, the Paralympics, we do a lot for them. Interestingly enough, I would say that they probably think that we don't do enough for them, honestly. We'd like to do more, but it's just basic dollars and cents. And traveling all around the world, paying entry fees, hotel rooms, flights, it can be quite costly. And when you combine the grants that we're able to give with the prize money, the actual Uniqlo wheelchair tennis tour, it's very difficult to really make a living unless you're really one of the top 10 players.
Yeah, yeah. Let's shift a little bit. So collegiate level wheelchair tennis. I think Clemson has a program now. San Diego State. Are you seeing growth in terms of collegiate level wheelchair tennis at all, or
out of this world growth? As we speak, Mike, I didn't know if you knew this. As we speak, the finals of the National Collegiate Wheelchair Tennis Championships is happening 30 minutes down the road at the USTA National Campus. I was out there yesterday, and by far, it is the biggest and best event we've had since its inception. We have so many additional colleges coming now. And the colleges that are coming have almost increased their team size and their entourage size by threefold. For the first year, we've got the University of Michigan, led by Dr. O, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and he has a delegation there of 20 people. We have Arizona State University there this year, San Diego State University, University of Alabama, University of Colorado, and many more that I'm forgetting at this moment. But it's grown exponentially, and honestly, Mike, we would have had probably double the numbers had it not been for COVID.
Yeah,
that's one of Jason's main missions. Jason Harnett has been spearheading the collegiate growth, and he's done a phenomenal job. I think when we started, we had 4 programs. Now we've got almost 15, 16, and 10 more about to come on. And the next step is to establish more junior scholarships. And I'm really glad that you asked this question, because it kind of, when you have someone that asks good questions, it really shows that they kind of really understand and they know, and they're asking the right things. And this collegiate space to us is a very important gap that has needed to be filled for a long time. Because quite frankly, if you want to get juniors interested in the sport and they have nothing to aspire to, such as a scholarship or college level, then you're going to lose them eventually to something else they can't. And then when you have those juniors, when they become adults that want to study because they know that they value the importance of an education, and they go to a school for 4 years, they can't train wheelchair tennis for 4 years because there's no program, there's nothing for them to do. And all those 4 years of potential we've lost now for them to get to Team USA.
Right.
So that is a critical gap for us, that collegiate space. And kudos to Jason Harnett for recognizing its potential and really putting most of his efforts towards it.
It's kind of interesting to me. I've asked a number of the wheelchair basketball athletes, coaches, how do we get more collegiate programs? Because there's a handful. And they said, well, it's about money. But yet, the UST has been able to grow wheelchair tennis. What's the difference? It's not that expensive to do as wheelchair basketball is?
That's a great question. I think money is a factor, but I think luckily for us, maybe this is the X factor.
Yeah.
We have gotten buy-in from top tier 1 research institutions top schools. So when you have a school like Alabama, University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa, the impetus behind Clemson starting a program was we can't let them outshine us. Honestly,
Yeah,
you
right. No,
know,
that's right. That's right.
that's another team who's here that I forgot to mention. Guess who else is here this weekend? Auburn.
Auburn is as well. Yeah.
You
Okay.
think Auburn wants University of Alabama doing something they're not doing?
No.
No. So you've got, University of Michigan up there.
Yeah.
That's a huge school. That's a top tier 1 research institution. And then, Michigan State also has a program. So when you have those big entities that have signed on,
yeah,
they are front runners. And the X factor to me as well, Mike, is the majority of the colleges that exist out there today do not have an adaptive sports club or an adaptive sports program as part of the student services that they provide.
Yeah.
So when you have more schools nationwide starting to add adaptive sports programming to their student services and having more clubs and activities, then you're going to see more of these entities crop up. And when you're talking about institutions like Michigan and Alabama and Auburn and Clemson, money's not really an issue.
Right.
As a matter of fact, they were explaining to me that it's the other side of the coin. They have so many potential donors out there that would love to stamp their name on something. And there's no more land or no more buildings that can be built at these big campuses like Alabama and Clemson, that they have people trying to give money and they can't do anything.
Yeah.
So maybe, at the smaller universities, it could be an issue. I could see Division II, Division III, smaller liberal arts colleges that have a low or small endowment. That I could see that being a potential issue.
But I think you're right. I mean, you're talking about a lot of ACC schools, I think. In North Carolina, where I used to work, UNC and Duke. I mean, where are they? Hopefully they'll come along at some point as well.
They will be very, very much, very quickly, actually. I'll tell you, I can tell you more about that later if you want.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. The other part, of course, about collegiate level adaptive sports is, so you're recruiting people with disability to attend college. So, for me, it's I wouldn't say it's a no-brainer, but you're going to be able to attract more students to your college.
Absolutely. And it's really an important part of having a well-rounded program as well. You want to attract a diverse crowd of people. And, part of what I've been studying lately in my doctoral degree is the lack of services that are available for people with disabilities at physical colleges, which is why when you look at online registration numbers juxtaposed with the disabled community, most of the disabled community do college online. That's not their preference, though. They'd much rather go and be part of the college experience. But the online experience makes it easier for them. So that's a whole nother conversation to be had of colleges making themselves more accessible. Even speaking about Clemson, I remember speaking to the director of the program a couple of weeks ago. I think there's maybe only 5 or 6 chair users on the entire campus. And when you think about the campus and you look at how hilly it is, it's almost, unless you're a Paralympian, it's going to be pretty difficult to navigate around that campus just by pushing. And when I took a tour of the campus, I was actually with a Paralympian, and there were parts of the campus where I had to push, and they're not used to that. They're used to being able to go wherever they need to go.
Yeah.
And I know that you've got those devices you can now stick on chairs that help you navigate stuff, but those are all lots of conversations to be had later on.
So I think it does bring up other conversations, which are really important about, how the able-bodied community has put barriers in place, which people didn't realize until
without
now.
knowing they did. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When I was at University of Arizona, I mean, why is Tucson such a hotbed? Because the campus is pretty flat, as I remember it. And so it makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. I hope we see more schools in California with collegiate level adaptive sports. I hope the UCs pick up on it. The Cal States pick up on it. Hopefully. Um, so we're getting towards the end of our interview. What are some final words that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Oh man, that's a very open-ended question.
It is.
I think that the key to continuing to grow wheelchair tennis is to get more coaches interested. When it relates to tennis, and I believe probably most industries are the same, coaches are the ones that drive our industry. If we can find a coach that's willing to put on programming and not afraid to work with a disabled athlete, because that's essentially what it is, Mike. You know, it's not that they're afraid, but it's an unknown territory, and there's a low self-efficacy, and that's sort of part of what my research is how can we have a higher self-efficacy when working with an athlete with a disability? And the key for me has been reciprocal mentorship.
Huh.
You know, the disabled athlete is mentoring me on their disability and their chair setup and their adaptive devices and however we need to adapt, just as much as I'm mentoring them on the tennis aspect. And so all of the courses that I've designed and that we're teaching currently speak to that, in terms of trying to not have coaches have so much fear and anxiety working with disabled athletes. But the key is to get more coaches involved. And I think with our new certification pathway that we're about to install across the country in the USTA, it's going to do something that's never been done before, which is expose adaptive tennis to potential new coaches from the get-go, which hasn't been done before. When I got certified as a USPTA pro and a PTR pro, all the course materials I read, the exam, the weekend where you go to get certified, not once was anything about wheelchair tennis or adaptive tennis mentioned, ever. And so we've changed that now. It's now going to exist at levels 1 and 2. So hopefully over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a large amount of new coaches being attracted to our sport. And hopefully with more coaches, we'll get more players. Right. But, you know, if anybody out there is interested in starting a program or learning how to coach wheelchair tennis, Mike, feel free to share my phone, email. I'm very accessible and I'm happy to help them get started.
All right. Thanks, Jason. You know, I'm interested, of course.
And I hope to see you in a few weeks.
That's right. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Take care. Bye-bye.